Welcome to Radio Bravery Live. I'm Justin Belshaw. I've had a couple comments lately that I need a little manlier dance moves, so I got them for you. Here we go. We got Shortchange Hero bringing us in, because there ain't no heroes in the Senate, ain't no heroes in Congress, except one. Mr. Bravery himself, Mr. Randstand. The champion of the Senate, the champion for independence, the champion for liberty, Rand Paul, Dr. Rand Paul. I put my hands together for him, be the only one standing against our budget bill, the only one standing up for our American prosperity. Welcome to Radio Bravery Live. Short show today, nice and quick and easy. We're going to cover a couple of headlines, and then I'm going to go into Rand Paul's epic grandstanding speech on the Senate floor, filibustering the budget deal as long as he possibly could until 3 a.m. as we have one bravery, one soul stands alone in American liberty, in protecting our freedoms, our money, and demanding that we stop throwing it in a closet and setting it on fire. This ain't no place for no hero, but we'll be there anyway trying. So let's jump into the first couple of headlines here. YouTube.com/RadioBravery is a site where you can subscribe today. The first article is out of the express.co.uk. Mr. President, please free Julian Assange, says Donald Trump advisor Roger Stone. Donald Trump's oldest political advisor has called on him to free Assange. It's about damn time. The founder of the controversial WikiLeaks website needs to go free. Writing for the Daily Express, Roger Stone has claimed Mr. Assange is a victim of the same conspiracy theory that has linked U.S. President to Russia and Vladimir Putin. A bunch of garbage. We've got this Roger Stone, the man who first persuaded Mr. Trump to run for the White House, says that the charges brought against WikiLeaks founder by the Obama administration for revealing U.S. embarrassing secrets should be withdrawn. The call comes after Mr. Stone, who was an advisor of U.S. President Richard Nixon and Ronald Reagan, visited the Ecuadorian embassy while he was in London to leave his business card for Mr. Assange, who has been in hiding since British courts decided to extradite him to Sweden on alleged rape charges. So this is by Roger Stone, a great article. He was addressing Oxford, Durham, and Cambridge unions at their universities. He went and met with Julian Assange, and now he's saying that Julian Assange has effectively been imprisoned inside an embassy for 6 years under siege from vindictive state intelligence forces. Knowing any actual contact with Assange would instantly become needless fodder back home for rabid partisans desperately clinging to their fast-sinking Trump-Russia collusion fantasy. He chose to drop off his business card. Roger Stone is now trying to be in contact with Julian Assange despite what everyone is going to say, oh, collusion, while Julian Assange is a complete independent, non-Republican or Democrat. If he did pick a side, it would be further on the left, but needless to say, I'm sure conspiracy theories are running rampant right now. But Roger Stone is calling on the president to free Julian Assange, extradite him back to the U.S. for safety. Then we've got this one out of RasmussenReports.com, daily presidential tracking poll. Trump's approval rating is nearly 50% now. Nearly 50% approval rating. Absolutely incredible approval numbers. He's at over 49% with 50% disapproving. That is one of the best approval rating numbers that we've seen in years, much better than Obama ever had. But that is pretty incredible out of RasmussenReports.com, one of the best polling sites out there. Then we have this story breaking today out of USAtoday.com. Government shutdown ends with Trump's signature on spending bill. It's a very unfortunate day as the filibustering did not last long from Rand Paul. And they did vote on it, and it narrowly has passed. So the budget bill will be going forward. Then you have this article out of the WashingtonExaminer.com. Senator Rand Paul, Congress ignores its budgetary duties yet again. No, that's not a repeat you're seeing on the news. Congress really is about to vote on yet another continuing resolution. It's fourth in a row since the fiscal year started, but you can ignore the legislative speak and remember that continuing resolution is shorthand for Congress didn't do its job. So Rand Paul, once again, the only person in the Senate or Congress standing up against this reckless, irrational funding and debt ceiling raising that we do not need in an in-debt country that has fallen to its knees already. This funding measure lumps together spending for all 12 departments of the federal government into a huge bill and continues to fund them without reforming or eliminating any wasteful spending. The powers that be say, quote, either vote to continue the deficit spending or shut the government down. While I don't want to shut down the federal government, I also don't want to keep an open government that borrows millions of dollars every minute. It's almost $2 million a minute now that we are borrowing. This year, the government will borrow nearly $1 trillion. The overall debt now exceeds $20 trillion and threatens our national security. We already have had one shutdown, and we are now a third of the way through the fiscal year with no real budget in sight. When was the last time Congress passed all of their spending bills? 1997. Only 4 times in 41 years has Congress done its job. 4 times in 41 years, folks. That's absurd, says Rand Paul. It's also unsustainable and a reckless abandonment of our responsibility, one that threatens our national security and limits our economic potential. So this is an article on the Washington Examiner by Senator Rand Paul, issued out today at 2:27 p.m. And this is now I'm going to go to as I end my commentary here for this very short edition of Radio Bravery Live, as I've got to hit the road. I'm going to play for you the epic grandstanding Randstand of Senator Rand Paul on the Senate floor, standing up for your American freedom, standing up for American liberty. The only person stands alone. Incredibly brave, incredibly awesome. This is one of my heroes, and here is why. It is this incredible speech. It is these incredible words where he stands up constantly for the American people, despite all odds, despite all other people against him, his own party. It's not his party. Rand Paul's party is the party of the American people. He is not falling into the left-right paradigm, and that's why everyone hates him. That's why he's attacked in his front yard from behind. That's why he's shot at in parks. That's why they're trying to kill him constantly. And this man is one of the bravest people in the Senate in our public office today. So Rand Paul gives an epic speech on government spending on the Senate floor February 8th, 2018. So incredible speech right here. We're going to go to this amazing epic speech by Dr. and Senator Rand Paul, one of my heroes and people that I look up to for real, true bravery. Let's go to this.
Add $1.5 trillion to the debt over the next 10 years. This is a large amount of money and something that we should be very wary of. This is in addition to what we were already running debt of nearly $1 trillion. So we're adding a couple hundred extra $1 billion a year to a budget and a country and a Congress that had already recklessly let spending get out of control. The bill is nearly 700 pages. It was given to us at midnight last night, and I would venture to say no one has read the bill. No one can thoroughly digest a 700-page bill overnight, and I do think that it does things that we really, really ought to talk about and how we should pay for them. One of the things this bill does is it's going to add $500 billion in spending over a 2-year period. This bill increases spending 21%. Does that sound like a large amount? Anybody at home getting a bonus or an increase in your paycheck of 21%? And yet your government's going to spend 21% more without really having a full debate, without having amendments. The exchange you just watched was me asking to have a 15-minute vote. I've been asking all day. I've been asking all week for it. We could have literally had dozens of votes today, but we squabble because people don't want to be put on the spot. So the reason I'm here tonight is to put people on the spot. I want people to feel uncomfortable. I want them to have to answer people at home who said, how come you were against President Obama's deficits, and then how come you're for Republican deficits? Isn't that the very definition of intellectual dishonesty? If you were against President Obama's deficits and now you're for the Republican deficits, isn't that the very definition of hypocrisy?
We got a quick short ad here we're going to skip, and it is done.
Definition of hypocrisy. People need to be made aware. Your senators need to answer people from home, and they need to answer this debate. We should have a full-throated debate. My amendment says this simply: we should obey the budget caps. What are budget caps? These are limits we placed on spending, both military and non-military. We placed them in 2011, and guess what? For a year or two, government actually shrunk. But now government's taking off, and this new stimulus of deficit spending will be as big as President Obama's stimulus. Don't you remember when Republicans howled to high heaven that President Obama was spending us into the gutter, spending us into oblivion? And now Republicans are doing the same thing. And so I ask the question, whose fault is it? Republicans? Yes. Whose fault is it? Democrats? Yes, it's both parties' fault. You realize that this is the secret of Washington. The dirty little secret is the Republicans are loudly clamoring for more military spending, but they can't get it unless they give the Democrats welfare spending. So they raise all the spending. It's a compromise in the wrong direction. We should be compromising in the direction of going towards spending only what comes in. And yet this goes on and on and on. You will hear people say, well, the military is hollowed out. We have not enough money for our military, and yet we doubled the amount of money we spend on the military since 9/11/2001. Look, I have family members in the military. I have retired members of the military in my family, and I care very deeply about our soldiers. In fact, you know what I would do? I'd bring them all home from Afghanistan. The war is won. People are talking about making a parade. Declare victory in Afghanistan, bring them home and have a parade, and give them all a raise. And yet, we go on and on and on, finding new wars to fight that make no sense, where we have no idea who the good guys are and who the bad guys are, that are so murky that halfway through the war we sometimes change sides, or the people we support change sides. So we're at war in Afghanistan after 16 years. Costs $50 billion a year. So they need more money for the military because we're in too many places for too long. We have no exact mission of why we're there, and it is not a militarily winnable situation in Afghanistan. There will never be a victory in Afghanistan. There may be a negotiated settlement, and they may flee when we come, but as soon as we leave, they come back. Are we to be there forever? For the umpteenth time, Congress is going to exceed their budget caps. We had something passed back in 2010. It was called pay-go. It was supposed to say if you're going to pay new money, you had to go find an offset somewhere else. You could only pay as you go. It was sort of like a family would think about it. If you're going to spend some more money, you either got to raise your income or you got to save some money. You know how many times we've evaded it since 2010? 30 some odd times. When I try to get them to pay attention to their own rules, like 3 or 4 people will vote to pay attention to the rules. We are in a terrible state as a country. $20 trillion in debt is bigger than our entire economy. You wonder why the stock market is jittery? Well, one of the reasons is we do not have the capacity to continue to fund a government like this. We've been funding it with phony interest rates that are concocted and given to us by the Federal Reserve, but they aren't real. What if interest rates become real again? Anybody remember when interest rates were 5, 10, 15? I remember as a teenager them being 19 or 20%. But historically, they've often been at least 5. You know what happens to the government when our interest rate goes to 5 and they have to borrow for Social Security and Medicare and all the other stuff we do? There'll be a catastrophe in this country. Already, interest rates are ticking up. Stock market is jittery. If you ask a question why, maybe it has something to do with the irresponsibility of Congress spending money that we don't have. So the bill's going to exceed the budget caps by $296 billion. And that's not counting the money they don't count. All right, so these people are really, really clever. Imagine them running their fingers together and saying, how can we hide stuff from the American people? How can we evade the spending caps so we can be even more irresponsible than we appear? So 296 is the official number, about $300 billion over 2 years that will be in excess of the budget caps. But there's another $160 billion that's stuck into something called an overseas contingency fund. The budget caps don't apply there. So we're $300 billion for 2 years over the budget caps. And then we're another $160 billion over the caps, so they just don't count it. They act as if it doesn't matter. We're just not going to count it. And then we come to catastrophes. And you might say to yourself, well, I have great sympathy for those people's houses were flooded in Texas and Florida. I do. My sister's house was flooded in Houston or near Houston. And so I have great compassion. But even for my family, I can't take the money from you or borrow it for the next generation. Just say, hey, here's a pot of money. Go rebuild your house. We should do it in a responsible fashion. We've already, I think, spent 30-some-odd billion on emergency relief for the hurricanes. There's another $90 billion. But you know what I've said? Instead of just plunking $90 billion down or actually printing it over at the Federal Reserve or borrowing it, instead of just doing that, why don't we take the $90 billion from somewhere in the budget that it shouldn't be? People come to me all the time, they want something from government. I say, well, if you want something from government, tell me where to take it from, because I'm not going to borrow anymore. We should take it from some other place in the budget. Where do you get the $90 billion from? So I've had some suggestions, and you know how many votes they get? About 10 or 15 people will vote with me. I say, well, you know what, let's not send it to Pakistan this year. They burn our flag, they put Christians in jail, they put the guy in jail, a Dr. Afridi, who helped us to find bin Laden. We finally got bin Laden. He'd been living high on the hog in the middle of a town, a mile or two from a military academy. Everybody probably knew he was there in the Pakistani government, and he lived uninterrupted. We finally got him when a guy named Dr. Shakil Afridi gave us information. You know what Pakistan did to this doctor? He's in jail for 33 years. You know what they did with a Christian by the name of Asia Bibi? Pakistan has her on death row. She went to the well in a small village to draw water. And as she was drawing water, the women of the village began stoning her and beating her with sticks as she lay on the ground bleeding, and everybody watched and gawked as she lay on the ground bleeding. She was crying out for help, and the police finally arrived, and she thought she'd been saved, only to be arrested for being a Christian. And yet we've given $33 billion to Pakistan over the last decade. Good money after bad. Almost everybody up here loves it. They just want more of your money to go to Pakistan, Saudi Arabia, China, you name it. They'll send your money anywhere. And we've got a country that needs it here. Instead of nation building abroad, why don't we build our country here at home? Why don't we do some nation building here at home? So we have $90 billion that we need for emergency relief. Even as conservative as I am, I would say we can probably find that. We're a great rich country. We can probably rebuild, and the government can be part of that. But you know what? Why don't we quit sending it to Pakistan? Why don't we quit sending it to countries who burn our flag and chant death to America? Why don't we keep that money here at home? Why don't we say to the government writ large that they have to spend a little bit less? Anybody ever had less money this year than you had last? Anybody better having a 1% pay cut? You deal with it. That's what government needs, a 1% pay cut. If you take a 1% pay cut across the board, you have more than enough money to actually pay for the disaster relief. But nobody's going to do that because they're fiscally irresponsible. Who are they? Republicans. Who are they? Democrats. Who are they? Virtually the whole body is careless and reckless with your money. So the money will not be offset by cuts anywhere. The money will be added to the debt, and there will be a day of reckoning. What's the day of reckoning? The day of reckoning may well be the collapse of the stock market. The day of reckoning may be the collapse of the dollar. When it comes, I can't tell you exactly, but I can tell you it has happened repeatedly in history when countries ruin their currency, when countries become profligate spenders, when countries begin to believe that debt does not matter. That's what this bill is about. But here's the confusion. Some at home will say, we just want them to cooperate. If they would just hold hands and sing Kumbaya, everything would be fine. Well, guess what? That's what you've got. You saw both of the leadership of both sides opposing me because they are now clasped hand in hand. Everybody's getting what they want. Everybody's getting more spending. The military, the right's getting more military spending. The left is getting more welfare spending. And you're getting stuck with a bill. Not even technically you. It's the next generation being stuck with the bill. Your grandkids are being stuck with the bill. But mark my words, the stock market is jittery. The bond market is jittery. There is an undercurrent of unease amidst this euphoria you've seen in the stock market. A country cannot go on forever spending money this way. And what you're seeing is recklessness trying to be passed off as bipartisanship. So we've gotten together, they're all holding hands, and there's only one bad guy standing in the way. One guy's going to keep us here till 3 in the morning. Well, you know what? I think the country's worth a debate till 3 in the morning, frankly. I think it is worth a debate on whether or not we should borrow $1 million a minute. I've been saying that for a few years. We borrow $1 million a minute because I think it really brings it home. And we were talking about with my staff today, and they say, you know, it's almost $2 million a minute now. $2 million a minute. Can you imagine? And this is exploding. This deficit is exploding, and there isn't the alarm you should see. But guess what? Every one of these people, you'll see them come home to your state. You'll see them come home, and they'll tell you how earnest they are, and how the deficit is bad, and big government spending is bad, and we have to reduce waste. It's dishonest. They're not doing anything about the waste. The waste has been out there for probably half a century or more. Nothing's been done in the last 40 years for one precise reason. There is no oversight. You realize what they are passing is all of the money glommed together in one bill. No one will read the bill. No one knows what's in it, and there is no reform in the bill. That I can say with absolute certitude. No one will read it, no reform, nothing gets better, the debt will grow. When the Democrats are in power, Republicans appear to be the conservative party. But when Republicans are in power, it seems there is no conservative party. You see, opposition seems to bring people together, and they know what they're not for, but then they get in power and they decide, we're just going to spend that money too. We're going to send that money to our friends this time. The hypocrisy hangs in the air and chokes anyone with a sense of decency or intellectual honesty. The right cries out, our military is hollowed out, even though military spending has more than doubled since 2001. The left is no better. Democrats don't oppose the military money as long as they can get some for themselves, as long as they can get some for their pet causes. The dirty little secret is that by and large, both parties don't care about the debt. The spending bill is 700 pages, and there will be no amendments. The debate, although it's somewhat inside baseball that we're having here, is over me having a 15-minute debate. And they say, woe is me, if you get one, everybody will want an amendment. Well, guess that would be called debate. That would be called an open process. That would be called concern for your country, enough to take a few minutes. And they're like, but it's Thursday, and we like to be on vacation on Fridays. And so they clamor, but we've been sitting around all day. It's not like we've had 100 amendments today and we're all worn out, we can't do one more. We're going to have 0 amendments. 0, goose egg, no amendments. So it's a binary choice. They love that word. It's a binary choice. Take it or leave it. Well, you know what? I'm going to leave it. I didn't come up here for this. I didn't leave my family throughout the week and travel up here to be a part of something that is so much inertia and so much status quo that they're not leading the country. They're just following along, and it's a big ball rolling down the hill, grabbing up your dollars as the boulder rolls down the hill, and it gets bigger and bigger, and it's going to crush us. But nobody's got the guts to stand up and say no. Over the past 40 years, only 4 times have we actually done 12 individual Department of Government appropriation bills. You've heard of like the Appropriation Committee. This is where the spending is. So you have like the Department of Defense, the Department of Commerce, Health and Human Services. We're supposed to pass each individual bill, and what would happen when we passed the bills, they would go through committee, and each committee would look and see, well, this spending seems to be working, we're getting a great result, and we want some more next year. And this spending appears to have been put in a closet and lit on fire, and so next year we're not giving that person who put the $10 million in the closet and lit it on fire, we're not going to give them any money. But guess what? That doesn't happen. So people keep putting your money in a closet and lighting it on fire. You've heard about FEMA. It's this emergency organization. You've heard about people without food. So there was like 300 million meals they needed, I believe, for Puerto Rico. 350 million meals. So you know who got the contract? A person that had no employees. Now raise your hand, you're not allowed to actually, but let's say raise your hand in a figurative way if you think it's a good idea to give a contract for 350 million meals to someone who has no employees, who's not already in this business. They just know how to fill out the forms in the federal government to trick us into giving the contract. They were woefully short, and there were still people waiting in line for meals. So it's not even compassion or no compassion. It's idiocy versus more idiocy. We gave the money to somebody who doesn't do this. 350 million meals. So over the past 40 years, 4 times have we actually done the right thing. Passed 12 individual appropriation bills, bundle them together, have a budget, and try to do the right thing. You know, there's no guarantee that everybody will be wise in their spending, but it's got to be better. It can't be worse. What do we do instead? It's called a continuing resolution. We glom all the bills together in one bill, like we've done tonight, Republicans and Democrats clasping hands, and nobody's going to look at it. Nobody's going to reform the spending. As a consequence, wasteful spending is riddled throughout your government. Only 4 times in 40 years have we done the appropriation process the way we're supposed to. Recently, they did a Pentagon study. It's the beginning of an audit, and they audited a part of the Pentagon. This partial audit shows that $800 million was misplaced or lost. Just $800 million. I don't think they actually put it in a closet and burned it, but they can't find it. A while back, they looked at some of the military expenditures, and they had $29 billion worth of stuff they couldn't find. Overall, the audit found that over $100 billion in waste was found at the Pentagon, $100 billion. Well, their budget's like $700 billion. So, you know, we're talking about a significant, over a 10%, problem with figuring out waste. But it doesn't get any better because we don't vote on all these things individually, and we don't parse out the difference. I'll give you another example. The Department of Defense, last year, we found this out, spent $45 million on a natural gas station in Afghanistan. $45 million. It was projected to cost $500,000. 86 some odd overruns, of cost overruns, $45 million. So you're scratching your head and you're saying, natural gas station, what is that? We don't have one in my town. We don't have any in my town either. They didn't have any in Afghanistan. But you know what? They decided that they needed to reduce the carbon footprint of Afghanistan. All right? They would reduce the carbon footprint of Afghanistan. I thought the military's job was to kill the enemy. So the military's job now is to reduce their carbon footprint? So they bought a $45 million gas station that serves up natural gas, and guess what they discovered? They kept waiting. So there's a guy sitting next to the pump. You can imagine him sitting on a stool, and he's waiting for customers. No one ever came. And then someone said, oh my goodness, they don't have any cars that run on natural gas. Well, that would probably be the same if you came to my town in Kentucky. Almost nobody's got a car in America. They live in a primitive state in Afghanistan, and you're expecting them to have natural gas cars? So they said, well, gosh, we already built this $45 million gas station. Maybe we should buy them some cars. So they bought them some cars with your money. They paid for the gas station with your money. Now they bought them some cars with your money. But then the people still wouldn't come in. They said, we don't have any money. And they said, okay, well, we've got the gas station. We've got your cars. You need a credit card. So we gave them credit cards. So they have a U.S. credit card that you pay for to take their natural gas car that you paid for to go to a natural gas station because we're reducing the carbon footprint in Afghanistan. When did that become the job of the military? And why does that go on year after year after year, the waste? For 17 years, we've been trying to get the Pentagon to be audited. And you know what their response has been? Hey, we're too big to be audited. How's that for your government? Your government telling you they're too big to be audited and that scrutiny's not, that's just not your business. Is it any wonder, really? It surprises me sometimes it's not worse, but is it any wonder that our debt's a $20 trillion debt? So 50 years ago, William Proxmire was a senator. He was a Democrat senator, a conservative Democrat in some ways. He began handing out something called the Golden Fleece Award, and we'll talk about a few of them. So this is 50 years ago. And the reason I want to point this out is, as you look at this and listen, you'll find that some of the stuff we're doing today is just as bad as 50 years ago. Some of it's the same agencies. And so you scratch your head and you say, 50 years? We've been through a couple generations of politicians, and they're still not learning anything from finding this waste? Some of it's the budget process. The process that we pass these enormous bills that no one reads, that no one scrutinizes, and that do not reform the spending. So William Proxmire used to do this Golden Fleece Award, and I remember this as a kid in the early 70s. So here's a couple of things that he had pointed out. This is sort of some of his best. So the National Science Foundation spent $84,000 trying to find out why people fall in love. Now there sounds like a really worthwhile science project with a real specific answer. I think the conclusion was they're not exactly sure. The National Science Foundation, which you'll see is a recurring theme in bad and wasteful spending, also spent about $500,000 to try to determine why rats, monkeys, and humans bite and why they clench their jaw. Well, now you could say, oh, well, that's really important. Maybe we'll discover something from that. Or you could say, when we're running a deficit and we're borrowing the money, that maybe some of these things may or maybe not be the most worthwhile to borrow the money for them. This is a good one. This is from the early 70s. Federal Aviation Administration spent $57,000 studying the body measurements of what they called in those days airline stewardesses. These were trainees, and these were for the purpose of purchasing their safety equipment. But somebody got $50,000 to measure the body measurements of airlines.
So that is a great long excerpt from the speech by Dr. Rand Paul in the Senate on government spending yesterday. Incredible speech, so many great points. Very, very nonpartisan, if you ask me, and that's what I love about Rand Paul. He doesn't pick a side other than the American side, the side of the people, the side of you and me, the people out there who need that money, those $700 billion being wasted, the $100 billion just unaccounted for, missing, $29 billion, who knows where it went. They just threw it in a closet and burned it. But please go to youtube.com/RadioBravery and subscribe today for more breaking news. We'll be here a lot more. And yeah, we've got a lot more coming. I've got t-shirts on the way. But thank you so much for joining me. Go watch that epic speech yourself and support Dr. Rand Paul. I want to give him a round of applause for being one of the bravest people in public office today. True patriot, true hero. And yeah, just thank you so much. I'm Justin Belshaw. This is Radio Bravery Live.